Yeah, now here's a review I've been putting off for a while. Not out of intentional desire to avoid it, mind you, but more the fact that I simply kept forgetting I wanted to look at it. However, since the game made a recent move to another publisher, I figured it might be time to look after all. Now, some of you might be saying, wait, didn't you already look at this? It's really familiar looking. And you wouldn't be entirely too far off in assuming that. So, let's get to explaining why I'm looking at this right now. This is the MMO Grinder, and it's time to look at Grand Chase. Yeah, I probably made a few people mad with that scripted flub and intro, but yeah, this is the game Grand Chase that I had mentioned in the Elsword review. The game that got more than a few angry forum posts about how they can't stand when people say that Elsword and Grand Chase are related, despite the game having the exact same art style, and artist, and developer, and gameplay style, and manga-style images popping out when using your skills, and a character appearing in both titles related to the main character of the other title. Hell, even now we can add another point of similarity since Grand Chase was transferred over from its original US publisher to Killer Combo, the publishers of Elsword. Can't keep that inexplicably militant denial up now, guys. Grand Chase is a 2D scrolling beat-em-up with 3D models and a Smash Bros. / MapleStory style of platforming. You choose from a cast of characters and fight your way from room to room until you confront a boss. There's differences here that make it distinct enough from Elsword, but there are things I'm going to have to go into detail about, so let's get to it. Offhand, you're going to see the Elsword similarities right away, but there's a key difference. Elsword's backgrounds and platforms are all 3D renders. Grand Chase tones it way down by having backgrounds static or semi-static images, and platforms are also images. On the converse side, the character models in Grand Chase do kind of look a bit more detailed than they do in Elsword, even if, like in Elsword, that's going to depend mostly on the outfit and armor you have equipped. Animations are still as flashy as ever, and some of the boss monsters are quite impressive to behold, but the game is very, very difficult to follow the action of, especially in large groups. I tend to lose track of my character behind all the lights, flashes, and explosions. In a common Korean MMO standard, there's a lot of translation issues in the game as well. Luckily, for the most part, they don't interfere with the gameplay too much, so it shouldn't pose that much of a problem. Grand Chase is a pretty solid soundtrack, varied and eclectic, a fun listen in parts, but seriously overshadowed by its sound work. There's a lot of epic themes, some guitar rock songs, upbeat, lighthearted tracks, and unfortunately there's no track as amazing as the Banthas boss theme from Elsword. There's also this K-pop main theme that everyone seems to hate for some reason. I'm not entirely sure why, as I don't have a problem with it. It is oddly bouncy compared to the remainder of the soundtrack, though. I actually find the sound work, as bombastic as it gets, to be pretty creative and well-placed. Each sound is distinctive to the character and highly representative of their weapon and playstyle. However, where Grand Chase does not shine is in the voice work. Unlike Elsword, which kept all his voices Korean, Grand Chase had the voice work done in English, and, well...
My resolve shall not falter.
The time is near. My destiny shall be fulfilled.
Today is a good day for destruction.
Fighting is the only way to prove myself.
3 of those are considered the best this game has to offer. While it's not as hard to bear as an Arctic blast, it can be pretty cringeworthy, but like the music, it's mostly drowned out by the sound work. You probably won't even notice it. Players who have had an account with Game Rage, formerly Intrive, aka the Panya people, should still be able to transfer over their old accounts to the new host Killer Combo. But if that's not an issue for you, go ahead and just create a new account. Keep in mind that when the game asks you for your character name, they mean your account name. All characters created from that point on will have the same name. Just in case you wanted to choose your dancer class Amy and name her Princess Twinklepop, then later choose the dual pistol wielding bounty hunter Rufus, who will now also be named Princess Twinklepop. When asked to choose a server, know that this is actually your channel and that you can switch it whenever you wish, so you're not stuck with one. Originally, you're only able to choose from 6 characters: Alesis, Lyre, Arma, Rin, Idel, and Vigus, With the very, very recent update to Season 5, I'm talking like a couple days ago, all 19 characters are now available to choose at the start. I won't be going over all of them, however. If you wish to see how a character plays before committing to one, you can click on Practice on the bottom of the screen and try them out with a limited set of moves. To get a feel for characters and types, I'll explain the first three: Alesis, Lyra, and Arma. Alesis is a melee and defense-focused knight-style character. She's a red-haired girl with a massive sword and sacrifices a lot of her attack power in favor of defense. Her four classes are Knight, Spearman, Swordmaster, and Savior. Lyra is a blonde elven archer who focuses on speedy attacks and, of course, range. She deals a lot of damage from afar. Her four classes are Archer, Crossbowman, Archranger, and Nova. Arma is a purple-haired mage girl with some of the highest attack stats in the game, according to the person who made this note for me. She's also, unsurprisingly, a glass cannon, barely being able to take any hits. She's highly skilled at large-scale AoE attacks, and her dashes are actually short-range teleports. Her four classes are Magician, Combat Alchemist, Warlock, and Battle Mage. If it sounds like I just described the three main characters from Elsword, you're probably also wondering how these people kept denying these two games were related in any way. Oh, and if you're keeping up with Elsword, Alesis was the latest character added to that game. You're running out of legs to stand on, guys. However, if you're still inexplicably militant about Grand Chase and Elsword being unrelated, that somehow the similarities are just coincidence, that Alesis' inclusion in Elsword is just merely a reference or tribute. If you really need a final nail in Denial's coffin, here's a pic of Alesis and Elsword together as children, now officially shut up forever. Each character has a distinct playstyle. Some, like Amy and Rin, with stance switching or alternate play paths. When starting out, you're taken to the tutorial, which is pretty standard for most characters, with the exception of Adele and Vigus, who have a completely scripted story, and a somewhat boring tutorial. In the case of Adele, who must complete the same stages 3 times before moving on to the next one. Doing a story character's tutorial will completely override the first area of the game, and you'll skip right into the next one once it's completed. It's odd because the playstyle of the story tutorials is almost completely different from the actual game. Controls are similar to Elsword, but simplified in a way. Pressing Z by default will use your basic attack. Pressing X will perform a secondary action, which will vary greatly by character. Adele will fire a flintlock pistol, but Amy will switch from dancer to combat stances and vice versa. Arrow keys move left and right, jump and drop a level, but can also be used to input special combo skills. You have a taunt as well, it's usually just for show. A, S, D, F, and G are slotted to special skills, and Q, W, E, R, T can have potions slotted to them. While it might feel ideal to play the game with a controller, it's odd, as you cannot customize the buttons on the controller at all, and you can't even reassign the keys to correspond with the odd controller choice layout. Case in point, only 2 special attacks are placed on the controller, and one of the face buttons is wasted on a taunt instead of something far more useful. Combat in this game, compared to its successor, feels a lot more calculated and deliberate. When you attack, it seems to really matter when you attack, and you can't just button mash your way to victory. Characters also seem a lot more floaty when they jump, and with some characters it's painfully easy to end up attacking in the wrong direction. Elsword vets have commented that the game feels a lot tougher to play than Elsword. Your character feels a lot more fragile, enemies don't go down quite as easily. Those used to Grand Chase's playstyle would likely argue against that point, but know that despite dozens of similarities, this game certainly does not feel like Elsword. Point in that favor, I guess. Your equipment and inventory used to be account Y, meaning something gathered on character A would automatically be in the inventory of character B. But again, a point to the amount of time I took to get this video out, the Season 5 change split all the characters' inventories. If you've been playing beforehand, you'll need to divvy up the gathered loot between all your characters that you have unlocked before you can start up again. The inventory, regardless, is pretty generous, and you only have to worry about clogging it up if you've never bothered to sell off the dozens of equipment pieces that the game will dump on you in each dungeon. Equipment can also be augmented with cards that drop, allowing you a simple stat boost, but these are best saved until levels slow down and you won't be swapping out equipment pieces every few levels. Speaking of, leveling works far faster than it used to, according to some vets. Apparently this game was a grinder's heaven in its early days. While some of the quests, like the now somewhat defunct ones used for character unlocks, requiring you to replay stages into double digits to grind for a certain item drop, the actual act of leveling is absurdly fast now, slowing only slightly into the 30s, but not enough that you won't feel like you're progressing at all. It took me mere hours to reach level 20, so playing with enough dedication should have you reaching caps and alternate jobs in no time. Certain levels will grant you new abilities in the skill tree, and this tree is much easier to navigate than the trees in Elsword. Adele's, for example, have less skills to obtain than there will be points to spend on them. especially considering that she only has 2 job paths right now. In fact, you can mix and match skills from all your job paths at your leisure. You can choose from Special, the usable skills slotted to the hotkeys, Actives, the combo skills that tie in with your attacks and button presses, and Passive skills just to give an easy boost to your stats. Keep in mind, certain skills, especially Actives, will not work with others, forcing you to pick and choose which one better suits your playstyle. Deeper into the tree doesn't always mean it's a better choice. Reaching alternate job paths will grant you a temporary outfit based on the art of that job class, and the quests for them range from, "Oh, really, that was it?" to, "Are you serious right now?" Before a lot of the recent changes were made, we're talking things like 50 PvP wins or 300 of an item that dropped 1 to 5 at a time. Nowadays, however, it's a lot less grindy, but still as painful, as the current goal is the number of wins in the extremely difficult and only open for a short amount of time hero dungeons. Keep in mind, some characters like Adele, Vigus, Lime, and Asin only have 2 classes to their name, and in the case of Vigus, only 1. I'm certain more will be added later, but be warned about that if you feel you might be hitting a progression wall with those characters. If you happen to die in dungeon, which later on is a thing that can happen with 1 shot depending on who you're playing, you can choose to replay the dungeon or revive with a token. You start with 10, but recharge only up to about 3. There's also cash shop items that can revive you and your whole party if need be, best used for later dungeons and some of the harder bosses, of course. From what I've been told, you should probably get used to me saying that, the game is far less populated than what it used to be, although the transfer to killer combo seems to be breathing some new life into this game. On the plus side, at least there's no one screaming at me about a knockdown mechanic that no one person seems to fully understand. Setting up a room is simple. Just click on the area you want to head to, choose the difficulty if applicable, and set up whether or not you want a password. Despite the much lower population, players do tend to jump into the room if you wait around long enough, and it's likely you'll end up alongside some high-level players who will blow through the room much faster than if you were to go it alone. Players also tend to be helpful if you have questions about the game. While in a room, you can choose to swap out equipment and check your skills before starting. If a player is in a room long enough without going ready, there's an interesting nudge feature that will throw a pop-up window into a player's UI to remind them that everyone is ready to go. There's actually a few seconds that you have to wait before you can use this, and you can't spam it onto people either. I actually see it as a welcome reminder in case I forget I'm in a room and I'm too caught up in changing out my armor. Opening at noon, Pacific Standard Time, are the hero dungeons, and they are no joke. There are bonus dungeons that have a limited amount of time to complete. While the stages themselves aren't entirely terrible to deal with, it's the bosses that will provide the most challenge. The boss will actually scale off the level and armor of the party that's fighting it. And it's a pretty common practice for players to go into hero dungeons completely unequipped in order to exploit this system and make the fight a lot less painful. Another tough mode is the championship mode, where you must have a ticket to enter, often given away in events or gained with points. In this mode, every monster has a status effect, and killing the boss drops a door, where you can summon an even tougher monster for a really good reward, that you probably won't be able to use for several levels if you were carried through it like I was. The PvP system was apparently the most popular feature of the game, but has definitely slowed along with the game's population. While originally you'd have pages of rooms to sift through, now you'll be lucky to see more than 4 active rooms at a time. It's still pretty easy to get into a room if you prefer to play as PvP, but with the odd sense of control and more deliberate playstyle of the characters and the way the game plays out, it's pretty tough for a new player. There is a sense of level balancing, however. I've seen level 20s take down level 40s, but it's still extremely hard for a newcomer to the game. You'll probably want to have a certain character's playstyle down pat before you attempt to face off against the other players. One odd thing of confusion, you can choose to play the game in teams or free-for-all, but when choosing free-for-all, the loading screen will split the players into teams anyway. Just know what mode was chosen before you accidentally decide to avoid killing one of your teammates, only to realize that they're going to attack you anyway since the free-for-all mode was chosen. There's still enough players to form the limited parties you need, but you might want to find some veteran players if you're really looking to get into this game. This cash shop isn't entirely too important anymore. Originally there were items you could purchase for the sake of gaining access to more characters, but now that all of them are available at the start, yeah. In fact, 2 of the characters, Lime and Asin, were originally cash shop only, making them the only characters you had to pay for unless an event was going on. While it's nice to have access to all the characters, unfortunately this change means that there's far less that you'll be intrigued to actually look into unless you're into alternate outfits. There's actually two cash shops. One called the Kaching Shop, featuring weapons that you'll outlevel in hours and armor that'll have more of a cosmetic purpose than anything else. The other shop, the Kawarda Shop, contains mostly cosmetic rental items that, while cheaper, don't really last all that long either. If you're really into the look, it's an option, but some of the armor drops in the game will look just as nice or nicer. Your call, really. While I repeatedly stated how I couldn't understand why people were so adamant about saying this game had nothing to do with Elsword, I can kinda get it. It feels almost like Elsword was the game COG was trying to make when they made Grand Chase. And just like those who would prefer EverQuest to EverQuest 2, there's something about the simplistic charm of the older title that might have more of a home to some players. Still, the game, while getting updates, is definitely showing its age, and those who wanted a more fast-paced beat-em-up style of game would probably be better off with this game's successor. If you'd prefer to be a bit more calculated, methodical, or just don't think that knocking down an opponent should be grounds for verbal thrashing, Grand Chase may be more your speed. Here's my final rating. Unlike many beat-em-up style games, Grand Chase doesn't have too much for you to keep track of. Having only one button assigned to you for main attacks makes learning combos and attack chains a breeze, and also makes the game fairly easy to play on a keyboard. There's not much to have to learn here, and what you do need to learn is pretty self-explanatory. Of course, the sheer number of characters to play as can be overwhelming, but pretty welcome, and each character plays in a manner that does feel different from the other. There should be no issue finding a character that suits your playstyle. Since the removal of the necessary quest to unlock characters, this shop has become a bit of a browse-at-your-own-leisure kind of place, which is a verbal code I think most viewers of my videos have figured out by now. In other words, you really shouldn't feel like you need anything in here unless you just want to spend some money on the game for support purposes, or to get an ever-so-slight edge to convenience. Keep in mind that if you're going to the Kawarda Shop, it's full of rentals before you decide on any outfit that you might really like. The game might feel a lot less speedy than other beat-em-ups, a detriment coming from the simple one-button basic attack combat, and far more deliberate and dangerous enemy attacks. As the combat feels slower, you might feel as if you don't have as much control over the characters as you'd like, and learning each character's combo chains is more of a matter of timing than dexterity. Of course, as part and parcel of the genre, there's a lot of grinding to do. You'll be repeating stages constantly, fighting the same enemies for items, and despite easing up on progression, there's still a lot of repetition to the game. If that bothers you, and bothers you in the genre in general, this game certainly won't change your mind. Next month I'll have two major things going on, the first and foremost being a game that I'll get to review thanks to meeting one of my Patreon goals, so stay tuned for Wildstar at the end of next month.
Your power is truly depressing.
Now bear my Arctic blast.